Good morning and welcome to our study of the Bodhisattva Guide. We might be experiencing some internet trouble, so kindly bear with us here from this department of broadcasting. Yeah, there could be some issues. Anyway, let's hope let's supplicate the internet gods and hope that won't be too much interruption. So we're presently studying this great classic, The Way of the Bodhisattva, by Shantideva. And in doing so, we are addressing the foremost difficulty actually that we have in the entire world, which is the projections of the confused mind and our misunderstanding the nature of our reality. And it all really comes down to a place of, well, you could almost say, well, let's not be judgmental about it, but it comes down to a place where we retreat into a condition, a delusional condition, where we perpetuate suffering. We perpetuate a position of self versus other, and essentially a condition of self-centering. And this is where famously, actually, we have the line from The Way of the Bodhisattva where Shantideva says, sentient beings look out for themselves, Buddhas look after others, look at the difference. And it's important that we don't bring to this a sort of moralistic attitude that we should be in a particular way and that we're not good enough the way we are now. But the implication is there's a sad delusional condition that has evolved. And this is what we refer to as samsara. But also the value of what we're presently doing really stems from the Buddha's inspiration that this is removable. This can be remedied. And so we practice the path with the intention to get to the bottom of this delusion. And particularly then, this is related to the notion of greatness, to get over the condition of confused self-centering and really aligning ourselves with the mind's natural condition of freedom from that kind of tightness, uptightness. And this is really the scope of the Bodhisattva path. The spirit of the Bodhisattva path is this greatness that is willing to really explore reality for what it is. And that's where we are presently looking at the instructions from Shantideva that proposes an approach that really looks at reality, not from the point of view of that we should contrive a particular idea about reality, but really looking at reality and also beginning in doing so to getting over our possibly assumption of fixating on something that really is unnecessarily deluded within ourselves. So the proposition is really a wonderful message of if only we would look at reality, we would be free. So this is what we're doing. But also, yes, there's a very real path in terms of application of ways of handling ourselves and handling our world, which then is going beyond just the narrow perspectives of ourselves and embracing the world at large, the larger community of sentient beings. Anyway, I shan't say more, but this is the spirit with which we undertake this study, and of course it is intended to be aligned up within our actual application of this vision. And luckily we are guided by Shantideva, we're guided by the commentators that followed Shantideva, and particularly then we have the fortune of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, who is then presenting this material for us. So we'll start off with what His Holiness himself actually suggests is that we begin the teaching with, which is just some preliminary liturgies that set sets the mood. Abandon evil doing, practice virtue well, subdue your mind. This is the Buddha's teaching. Like a star, an optical illusion, or a flame, a magical illusion, a dewdrop or a bubble, like a dream, a flash of lightning or a cloud. So should one consider all compounded things. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so on, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. So here we have Shantideva, surrounded by some of the great sages of India. And let's see here. I apologize. Here we go. All right. So we have presently a situation in which we have a delusional condition, and that is, of course, what we're intending to remedy. So this delusional condition does not come about through anybody having done anything bad. It's just like when we lose, how did it say? When we lose our mind, when we're, say, lost in thought, if we're falling asleep and we dream, we don't realize we're dreaming, and so on. This has nothing really to do with good or bad. It has just to do with the condition of being, you can say, not properly aligned, not being properly present. And for the most part, sentient beings wouldn't even suspect that there's something to be known about the mind. Just tagging after the projections, the perceptions, and so on, without actually recognizing that there's a condition of duality, a condition of confusion taking place in sentient beings. They are lost, and we are lost in that condition. But all of that really boils down to simply not looking. We refer to it as ignorance, because sometimes we think of ignorance as sort of a value-laden statement in terms of, you ignorant person, you ignoramus in that. And that's not really what's implied with the Buddhist sense of the word maripa or avidya, which is just having lost sight. And yet the remedy, or rather for that very reason, the remedy lies in not sort of a huge amount of education or some great secret or whatever, really just looking at the very core of our experience. So that act of no longer ignoring reality, ignoring the place from where everything really originates, which is our mind. Looking at that, then we are eliminating ignorance. So you could say it's a discontinuing of the process of ignoring. So here His Holiness says, ignorance, the belief that things are real, is extremely powerful. But we should remember that it is nothing more than a mistake. It is merely a misunderstanding that we cling to, which in fact has no foundation whatsoever. Its opposite, the understanding that phenomena have no reality, is based on a consistent truth that stands up to all argument. Now, this is rather an important point, because us who, you could say, assert, accept, and follow the propositions of modern science, we do so on the basis that science is seen to be verifiable, that we can observe something and we can understand its nature through observation, and doing so free from bias, free from metaphysical propositions, ideas, beliefs, and so on. And so simply nakedly looking at reality is then what constitutes a valid knowledge, a valid science. And this is what we do in the Buddhist teaching with regards to all phenomena. And this is also what we touched on earlier here in the text, and which you come across in all the various Buddhist teachings on essentially ontology, or looking at the nature of how reality abides or exists. But we do so with the same foundations, what we could call the epistemic foundations. The validity of this knowledge is not founded on anything other than actual observation. And so in analyzing and seeing that there is nothing that is actually has the reality that we impute on it, we do so not on the sort of the idea that I would like to think there's nothing that's real because it's all scary and I'd rather think it's not real. That's not it. It's looking at any given phenomenon and identifying how it's actually a composite. It's a web of causes and conditions. This is what we in Buddhism call dependent arising, and this is the foundation for what we call emptiness, which means that phenomena simply don't exist the way that we think they do. So it's really about us looking at phenomena, and all the analysis that we operate with in Buddhism is really about us looking. So that's where His Holiness then continues. If one familiarizes oneself with this understanding, it can be developed indefinitely, since it is both true and a natural quality of the mind. So we refer this analysis is directed towards all phenomena that we can observe, you could say objectively, as well as also the observer, the subjective dimension of the mind. We can look and see that there is nothing that is constant or unitary or independent about phenomena anywhere, at any given time or under any circumstances. So that understanding can be developed indefinitely. And it can be because it is what we see if we actually can be bothered to look. So His Holiness says, as it develops and grows more powerful, it acts as the antidote to the erroneous belief that things are real, which is bound to become correspondingly weaker. Now, again, when we say that we begin to see that things aren't real, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden we're left with nothing. It's rather the delusional projection that we ascribe to phenomena, that we impute on phenomena. We find that that has no reality. But what we then discover is the nature of reality as it exists. And as much as it doesn't possess the inherent existence that we impute on it, what we're actually doing is diminishing reality. And on the basis of this analysis and a gradual seeing of the nature of phenomena, this is where the nature of phenomena, you could say, flourishes. That's where our personal being flourishes, and also our appreciation for the phenomenal world flourishes. So when we say we are seeing through this belief in the reality of phenomena, we're simply just letting go of a rigid assumption about a particular way that phenomena exist. If phenomena exist beyond the way that we narrow them down, we construct phenomena according to our particular individual disposition, our particular, you could say, shared perceptions and so on, but we're actually not really seeing reality for what it is. And that's where we can see the message from the Buddha and from the sages and so on, is that there's a great reality that is to be discovered the moment that we're willing to see through our delusion. And that's where we can talk about seeing through this appearance of an apparent reality, and this delusion becoming correspondingly weaker. It doesn't mean that reality goes away. It's on the contrary, we begin to really discover, we become enlightened, we become aware. We realize the nature of reality. But this is on the basis of eliminating this confusion. Now, His Holiness then says, can we get rid of this misunderstanding completely? It is said, the nature of mind is clear and luminous, but obscurations are adventitious. So this is really the key words of what we're doing here in terms of uncovering the nature of the mind is understanding that it is clear. And what we mean with clear is that it's cognizant. It's knowing. We all sit and hear and live through this condition of knowing. And this knowing is innately luminous. It manifests brilliance. Now, presently then, this is obscured, but these obscurations that prevent us from seeing this, these are adventitious in the sense that they go away. They are fleeting. They are removable. We have to be proactive in removing them, but they are in no way solid and something that we're stuck with. So His Holiness says, although these obscurations may have been present for a long time, they are not of the same nature as the mind. So these obscurations are not the nature of mind. So as the antidote, the correct perception of things develops. So as the antidote, the correct perception of things develops, these obscurations can be completely dispelled. The nature of mind, clear and aware, is free from defects. It cannot be affected by obscurations. No phenomena, whether mental or occurring in the external world, can affect it. Nothing can alter this natural quality, which is the innate character of the mind itself. The belief in the reality of things is based on incorrect perception and is quite contrary to the mind's nature. But because of present conditions and ways of perceiving that have long grown habitual, we tend to experience things erroneously. Therefore, on the one hand, this mind that sees how things are not real is able to destroy its opposite, the conviction that phenomena are real. On the one hand, however powerful this erroneous belief in reality may be, it cannot affect the innate nature of mind. Okay, so we need to be clear really and not get stuck in the semantics here, because what we're talking about is, of course, seeing reality, which sometimes is some teachers will translate absolute truth as reality, and that's justifiable because that is, you could say, the undeceiving, genuine quality of everything. So we can talk about reality, but what we're talking about here is this deluded perception that holds, we can call it phenomena as real, or we can say solid, that we simply fail actually to see their reality. So that's where we shouldn't get stuck on the words when we're saying here the erroneous belief in reality. We're talking about this erroneous belief in the solidity that fails to understand the actual nature of reality. So we're simply just talking about that presently we're stuck with a deluded reality and we're really trying to penetrate through to, you could say, actual reality. So as it is said in the sublime continuum, meaning the Uttara Tantra, stains are adventitious, qualities are inherent. And I'm always quoting Tontakan Rinpoche, who said when he was giving refuge that the most important thing when we take refuge is really to understand that our confusion is removable. And this is what is said here: stains are adventitious, they're fleeting, they can be removed, they don't have any abiding substance or reality. And the qualities, and this is also important, the qualities, the enlightened qualities, and we sometimes talk about enlightened qualities in terms of wisdom, in terms of compassion, in terms of strength. And this is what the great sages that awakened, they exhibit these qualities. And these are not qualities that are built up or constructed. They are inherent. They are what's naturally there, but for the time being obscured. His Holiness continues, this is very thought-provoking, because these obscurations are in fact something separable from the mind. We can get rid of them, provided we continue to practice and apply the antidotes again and again. All negative emotions can be uprooted, and since they have never penetrated the nature of the mind, even the habitual tendencies they leave behind as traces will then be eliminated. So the very nature of the path is to see the delusional condition and the unreal condition of our projections. And on the basis, on one hand, understanding and really seeing the deception and the hoax that is taking place. Trungpa Rinpoche refers to this as the cosmic joke, which of course is, from our point of view, is certainly not a joke, because we're very serious about this condition that we're in. We are. And yet it's something that is just a delusion that can be removed. And so the path remedies that. And this is where we talk about uprooting, we talk about antidotes, and so on and so forth. This is the whole process of the path, where we, on one hand, understand, and then also particularly then through the practice of meditation, we actually integrate this vision with direct experience. And you could say this transforms our character. So that's where we then, in practice, leave behind this confused condition and all the tendencies that come with this confused condition. By the way, I was just looking at the well, the webinar announcement that there's sort of a subtitle that says Chögyam Trungpa's sort of Chögyam Trungpa's presentation of the Vajrayana, and that's because I sort of copied the previous course we were doing in terms of the times and the format and so on, but I forgot to remove that one there. So of course, if anybody was confused with regards to that, this is just sort of a mistake. I'll get onto it. Anyway, His Holiness says, when the mind is completely free of these negative emotions and tendencies, it understands and knows all phenomena. By exerting ourselves and using the right methods, we can actualize the potential that we have for such omniscience. It's only because there are obscuring veils between the mind and its objects that we are unable to know all things. Once these veils have been removed, no new power is needed. Seeing and being aware is the nature of the mind itself. As long as the mind exists, it has the ability to know. But this ability does not reveal itself until all obscurations have been removed. This is what it means to attain enlightenment. If we think along these lines, the desire for enlightenment will grow in us. So we're not innately confused, and it's really just a question of us misperceiving reality. We're in some way subject to a kind of self-deceit and wishing to extract ourselves from this self-deceit, from our own self-deception. Then we develop this aspiration, the desire for enlightenment. And we, not just for ourselves, but we also see this is really what afflicts everyone everywhere. As for the wish to work for the benefit of others, this comes from realizing that, just like ourselves, all beings, not just humans, want to be happy and not to suffer. In fact, we all have compassion. We want to free others from suffering. And to some degree, we all love and want others to be happy. These feelings may not be very strong or extensive, but everyone has them in some measure. When, for example, we see someone in agony, we spontaneously think, how terrible, and we want to relieve them of their pain. Just as we ourselves do not want to suffer, but to be happy, we can have the same wish for others. Although we may have very little compassion and love at the moment, these are things we can develop. As they grow, so also will our wish to work for others. Now, we're talking here about cultivating qualities, right? Compassion, we might not have compassion and they can develop, we can cultivate them and so on. But it's important to understand that when we're cultivating these qualities, we're not doing so on the basis of these are qualities we don't possess. They're simply qualities that are obscured. And that's again where when we develop these qualities, we align ourselves with the abiding nature within. Also for that reason, we feel happy. When we develop compassion, we feel better. It's not like, oh God, now I feel compassionate, though I'm such a burden to think of others. It's the other way around. We become freer, lighter. And so this cultivation is, in a way, a practice of yoga. It's aligning ourselves with an abiding condition. We're not imposing anything on ourselves. We're not violating anything in ourselves. We're aligning ourselves with, you could say, an innate nobility, an innate set of qualities that are, like we just saw, which are inherent. So His Holiness then says, in order to have the desire to attain enlightenment, even if it is for our own sake, we have to know what is to be gained by being enlightened and what is lost by not being so. For this, we should reflect on the imperfections of samsara, and even those of nirvana when considered as the other extreme. So recognizing the shortcomings of samsara is again something that's a little bit challenging for us in the modern world, who've been brought up with this belief that, you know, our consciousness is a product of the brain, and hence when you die and the neurobiological systems no longer function, then that's the end of consciousness. The Buddhist might think that's a nice thought, because then you don't have to worry beyond just this particular life. So it could be a comforting thought. It could be a relieving thought to think it's all over. But unfortunately, this is not the case. And if we investigate the mind, it is not something which is constructed in this tangible manner. As we see things that come together and fall apart and so on, the mind's nature is not like that. And so the Buddhist teaching speaks about how mind gets caught up in its projections, which is what we call realms. And of course, we certainly can define the cause of these realms within the psychological spectrum of our experience. And that's where, for example, teachers in the modern world, Buddhist teachers in the modern world, notably Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche, yeah, uniquely describes the six realms in terms of psychological experience and the imprisonment of these psychological experience. Caroline Rose Gimian, she describes a sort of very, very interesting situation where when Chögyam Trungpa initially was teaching the jewel ornament of liberation by Gampopa, which has, you know, vivid descriptions of what it's like to be in these various realms. The students at the time, which were obviously quite new to the Buddha Dharma, they sort of rebelled, say, we won't have any of this. You know, this was just too medieval, too Hieronymus Bosch, you know, too just horrifically, and so of course associated with institutions that were rejected, which you could say justifiably are rejected on their lack of, you know, science. And so Chögyam Trungpa very skillfully would then describe the sufferings of samsara in terms of their actual cause. But what we do find in the Buddhist teaching is how these causes also manifest beyond just the experience of this human realm. And that is where we probably are going to have to sort of make up our minds a little bit with regards to this thing of rebirth, which of course is for some people sort of very annoying, because Buddhism seems so rational, but then it talks about things that we can't make sense of. And of course, yes, how could we make sense of it given our, you could say, the nature of our science? And that is where Buddhist science extends beyond that and talks about, well, you know, the nature of reality as contingent on the mind, and also speaking about these, you could say, ontological conditions of samsara and nirvana, stuck in confusion, free from confusion. So anyway, the various realms that we then get entangled in, and this is then not just, you could say, within our present human existence, but all along. You could say as long as mind, which in that it's not constructed and not, say, born, it doesn't have anything about it that can cease. So that's where, as long as we're stuck in that, then we experience suffering. And these are then the various realms that we have in the Buddhist teaching that describe various, you know, conditions. And as long as we're not free from this delusion, then we might have some blissful experiences, and we might have some suffering experiences, all of this within the, you could say, spectrum of the deluded mind. But while nothing of this has any reality beyond just being delusion, it is experienced as real, just like in a dream. So that's where we have, on one hand, then the determination to be free of this condition of samsara. And also, and this is also significant, we also are not intending to sort of go into some ultimate comfort zone. And that is where sometimes there's the notion that we let me see if I can find it here. Yeah, when we have the notion of nirvana as this personal comfort zone that we retreat into, then we're free. That is one idea of thinking of freedom from the sufferings of samsara. And indeed, we do have what's called nirodha or gokpa, which is the condition of just settling into peace. But that, from the awakened perspective, is just a temporary solution. It's justifiable. In the scriptures, it's referred to as completely acceptable, just like if you're crossing the ocean and you wish to take a break on an island somewhere before proceeding onward across the ocean, then that's fine. But it's not enlightenment. It is still contains this cognitive obscuration of fixating on a self. And that's where this personal nirvana is also seen as a construct of delusion. So we would say, we talk about these as then the two extremes of, on one hand, the self that gets involved in confusion and the pain of confusion as samsara, and then also the self when it settles into nirvana. So we would say these are deluded constructs. They are extremes. That's where we refer to then genuine enlightenment as being not abiding in any such extremes. That's where we talk about non-abiding enlightenment, which is then what we aspire with on the Buddhist path. So His Holiness says, as it is said in the essence of the middle way, because they see its defects, they avoid samsara. Because their hearts are loving, nirvana will not hold them. The wise who wish the happiness of beings dwell even in samsara. So the sages clearly see no point in being caught up in the deceptions and the unnecessary suffering of samsara, yet caring. And they could say the very nature of awakening is caring, is love. Then there's no question of just staying in some condition of peace. Nirvana will not hold them. So those who have genuine awakening and wisdom, they are aware of the suffering of others, and they happily take rebirth in samsara. They dwell even in samsara. They're not tainted by the confusion, but they're also at the same time, they're driven. Their engagement with entering into the world is not driven by confusion, it's driven by compassion. So it's a very different experience. His Holiness says they are not imprisoned by samsara as they have seen its imperfection. Because of their great compassion, they do not linger in nirvana. As they know that there are defects in both, they aspire to an enlightenment that transcends these two extremes. So His Holiness says, first we have to be aware of what is wrong with samsara, since this is the basis for the wish to attain enlightenment. To turn away and free ourselves, we must reflect on what is considered to be the sufferings of samsara. Sorry, to turn away and free ourselves, we must reflect on what is considered to be the sufferings of samsara. This will give rise to the desire to free others. So we simply understand the condition of samsara, and this will give rise to our desire to free others. So, moreover, if we are to overcome our hopes and ambitions with respect to future existences, we must first confront our clinging to the present life. This is something we can train in step by step. And this is where we need to have this determination, renunciation. That's where there has to be a clear recognition of what's what. And that's where there has to be a recognition that we are deluding ourselves by fixating on these appearances that basically just entangle and distract us. And this is, of course, something that we haven't done before. So it's something that requires training. It's something that we need to, you know, um, it's something that we need to familiarize ourselves with, actually be clear on. It's a bit like if we've been in the habit of eating bad food, and we realize this is really not good, or in the habit, some style, some lifestyle that we've been habituated to, and which we realize is just not good for us, then it takes some time. We might sort of fall back on sort of eating stuff that's not good for us, or lifestyle, choices that are not that helpful. And that's where we realize, hey, wait a minute, this is not what I want to do. So that's where we have this element of training. We're clear on what needs to be done, and we need to gradually familiarize ourselves with that. This only says bodhicitta is a very good state of mind, imbued with wisdom, in which kindness is combined with the highest intelligence. It is something quite marvelous. This sort of goodness and kindness brings us peace immediately, so we are less narrow-minded and agitated. When we meet others, we do not feel claustrophobic and distant. On the contrary, we feel close to people. With a mind like this, we're never afraid, but strong and courageous. This is a very useful attitude to have. And again, cultivating this bodhicitta is something that aligns ourselves with our innate Buddha nature, with our innate condition. And it is something that is a practice of cultivation in terms of us familiarizing ourselves and also engaging our thoughts and our attitudes and our character with this project. So of course we could say, yes, the nature of mind is beyond any conceptual constructs and beyond any habitual patterns and so on. That's true. And that is, you could say, the highest intelligence. But we also, on the basis of skillful means, generate this kindness, this goodness of heart. And that is then where we combine these two. We refer to this as the unity of compassion and wisdom, or wisdom and skillful means. And this is something that is aligned with what we naturally are. And it is hence something that we could say this goodness and kindness is not a construct of us all of a sudden adopting a new style, of a new contrived style of reinventing ourselves, but it is aligning ourselves with the deepest disposition of freedom from confusion. The basic untainted condition that's innate to us is free from our self-centered neurosis and actions. And so with this cultivation of goodness and kindness, it brings peace. It brings us to begin to connect with an unconditional core of our being. And this is very expansive. So that also is where we also naturally have less of a, you could say, a reaction in terms of setting up barriers between self and other. There's a natural empathy that develops here. So this is the manifest quality of bodhicitta, is this embracing and openness to with regards to others. So in a sort of rather understated way, Zona says, this is a very useful attitude to have. The Bodhicharyavatara, then, the way of the Bodhisattva that we're studying, is not a compilation of Shantideva's own personal ideas, nor is it a straight repetition of the sutras. It is rather the teaching of the sutras in condensed form. So, again, well, you should read the story of Shantideva. I'm sure all of you are familiar with it. But it is essentially a teaching that was given like a spontaneous song, and it was then written down. And it really is a condensation or a summary or a digest, whatever you have, but we could call it a pith instruction, a profound overview of the entire Mahayana path, or the entire path of the paramitas. So Shantideva says then in the second sloka, he says, "Here I shall say nothing that has not been said before, and in the art of prosody I have no skill. I therefore have no thought that this might be a benefit to others. I wrote it only to habituate my mind." So this is not his own invention. This is really just repeating the words of the Buddha, and it's not something that's done to sort of show off in his great skill, play with words and so on. But it's really about, and that's where he's being very humble and understating. He says, I shouldn't pretend, or I shouldn't propose that this is going to be something that I could anyway benefit others with, but it's helpful for myself. So this is where, just speaking to myself. So nobody should be offended if Shantideva challenges our beliefs and our assumptions and attitudes. If he's challenging, then we shouldn't be offended. He's really just talking to himself. He's giving some sound advice to himself. So His Holiness, quoting Shantideva, he says, "Here I shall say nothing that has not been said before, and in the art of prosody I have no skill," is said simply to ward off pride. To those who wish only to accumulate knowledge, he has nothing new to say. And as he does not think he can be of help to others, he's writing this text to further his own spiritual practice. And that of those who are at the same stage as himself. The first of the 10 chapters of the Bodhisattva deals with the qualities of bodhicitta. That's where we are right now. As a preparation for bodhicitta, one needs to practice the 7 branches so as to accumulate merit and purify oneself. This is the subject of the second chapter. The third chapter then describes how to generate bodhicitta. So these are the 3. Remember, the book is divided into basically, there's 10 chapters, but they're essentially organized in terms of 3 sets of 3. So the first 3 chapters identifies bodhicitta. The second is how the second sets of 3, they're about how to enable bodhicitta, how we may further it, and then the last ones are how to really sort of fully bring it to fruition. So there are these present are about identifying, creating the conditions for, and fully generating bodhicitta. His Holiness then says, the subsequent, the 6th of these, generosity, is dealt with throughout the text, and there is no specific chapter devoted to it. How to practice pure discipline is explained in the 2 chapters of carefulness and attentiveness. And these are then the chapters 4 and 5. These are followed by chapters devoted to the last 4 paramitas, namely chapter 6 on patience, chapter 7 on endeavor or energy, diligence, chapter 8 on meditative concentration, and then chapter 9, wisdom, the wisdom chapter. And you would have seen actually there are the wisdom chapter, which is quite is really important. There are some commentaries that have been published, just translations into English of the wisdom chapter and the commentaries on these. I think we have from Jamgon Mipham Rinpoche, the Padmakara translation committee. They published this Jamgon Mipham Rinpoche's commentary on the wisdom chapter. It's called the wisdom chapter simply. And then we also have 2 translations from Khenpo Kunsang Palden and Khenpo Minya Kunzang Sonam, which Padmakara also translated, and it's called Wisdom, 2 commentaries. So we have we have a fair bit on translated into English on the Wisdom chapter. Anyway, we would say that all the preceding chapters really constitute, say, the necessary conditions for understanding then wisdom. So it's very important. It's very important in terms of us engaging as practicing Buddhists to have all these instructions really on how to approach the path. And then His Holiness says, finally, Shantideva concludes the text with a chapter on the dedication of merit for the benefit of beings. And so, Minya Kunzang Sonam, following the tradition of Paltra Rinpoche, explains the structure of the Bodhisattva Bodhicharyavatara around Shantideva's famous verse. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen, may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. So, okay. Hey, I'm not seeing any questions. If you have any questions, you're certainly very welcome to write them in. Questions, yeah, and there's a little place where you can write questions. But if not, then I'll just continue a bit. Hence, I shall remove my marker here. One question. Yeah, we try to be on time. Hi, Jakob, can you please recommend one of the translations of chapter 9? Well, the ones I just mentioned were the translation by Padmakara. They're both translations by Padmakara, and these are then 2 works. There's 2 works. The first I mentioned was a work that's called The Wisdom Chapter, and it's by Jamgon Mipam Rinpoche. And it's a quite extensive and rather important commentary. And then there's another translation which is called Wisdom: 2 commentaries. And these are 2 shorter commentaries then by Khenpo Kunzang Palden and also Khenpo Kunzang Palden was a disciple, I think, of Paltra Rinpoche, but also of Jamgon Mipam Rinpoche. And we have his entire translation of the Bodhicharyavatara translated, the Nectar Speech of Manjushri. But in Wisdom 2 commentaries, we have 1 commentary by him then on the Wisdom chapter, and then also 1 commentary on the Wisdom chapter by Minyak Kunzang Sonam, who His Holiness the Dalai Lama was just mentioning. Then there's a question here: how to prevent, remedy, or ensure we don't become a so-called jaded Buddhist? How much of it is just a matter of the Dharma being stuck in the head and not brought down to the heart through the practice of applying this? So this is where this is where it's rather important that we meditate, that we really are disciplined in meditating and tasting what it means to work with our minds. Then it never becomes jaded. We never become jaded because we're constantly aware of our shortcomings, the challenges that are taking place. It becomes a very vivid process So jaded is when it's just ideas. Yeah, there's this, and then there's also that, and it it doesn't really touch us. So that's for something for the Dharma really to touch us. And we're generally brought up in a culture where we're very cerebral, very analytical, and that's great to some extent because it can give us determination. It can give us passion around this, our ideas. In the modern world, people are so passionate about their ideas. So once they're onto something, they really pursue it very often with great passion. But if there's not really an understanding, or if we just approach this as sort of a religion where we just, we subscribe to the church and its ideas and dogmas, and we're just sort of part of the culture, and it's nice, and we like our Buddhist friends and all of that, yeah, then we could become Buddha. Then we could become jaded. And so that's where it's really important to get over that, the practice of meditation, particularly the practice of sitting meditation, shamatha vipassana. So important to sit and just allow ourselves to experience being. And this is really important, particularly for those who follow Tibetan Buddhism, to, of course, all the various practices that involve liturgy, visualization, so on, they're all very good, but they actually require a grounding in sitting and a grounding in a very immediate awareness of what's happening with our own mind, or else it's just another distraction. So really important to do sitting meditation. That's, I would say, that really would enable us to connect with the living Dharma inside ourselves, and then we don't become jaded. Many thanks for this morning. In the present time, when many beings are suffering and there is confusion and fear about our future on this planet, how can we assist those who are not on the path and in the grips of fear and paranoia? Do our best. Simply just be a comfort to people around us. We don't need to go around banging Buddhist truths. We just be nice, just be helpful. And of course, from our perspective as practitioners, this is something that we can see in the teachings again and again. The circumstances change continually and possibly not in our favor. And that's where we should appreciate presently we have the freedom and the opportunity to practice. And we should pursue that, but particularly then with assisting those who are not on the path and who are gripped by fear and paranoia, simply just to be a rock for them. People will, for somebody who's practicing, very often there is a sense of reassurance for others who are not practicing. So that's where what we can do is simply just be there for them, never to, just really not be there in terms of presenting the solutions, because sometimes it's difficult to change circumstances. Of course, in terms of, we just have this the latest work from, I forget the name of this agency, but of course, this very substantial assessment about the condition of the global warming, climate change, right? So this, of course, this will affect a lot of us in terms of our thinking about the future. And that's where we need to go beyond our own insecurity and also just really just develop heart. Not that we need to go out and, save the world in that sense, but more just that our heart really is sympathizes with all the lives that are going to be affected by this. So to really just rather than sort of the cerebral project of thinking we must do this and must do that, or just being angry at the ignorant people, decision makers that fail to recognize the situation, rather just then with kindness be constructive. And that of course also means to, with kindness, vote in favor of those who possibly would have a more mature perspective on what needs to be done, right? But anyway, this is something where there's never a question of us all of a sudden just being enlightened or anything, but what we can do on a very immediate level is simply just be kind and helpful to people around us, create an atmosphere of that. Even though I'm a practitioner, I'm still freaked out about the looming climate disaster. Well, being a practitioner means we're practicing. So that would be normal. Being a practitioner means we're a sentient being who is stuck with the conditions of confusion. And so it's natural as a normal human to be profoundly worried about this. So yes, but then again, what we're doing as practitioners, and then what this entails really is that we need to get onto a constructive angle. This is a, you could say, wake-up call to us to practice, come to really deepen and familiarize ourselves with the perspectives that the Buddha is introducing us to. And what's the scope of this here? And that's introducing us to something that lies beyond the ordinary worries about the phenomenal world. This is where we take refuge in that which is beyond the conditions of suffering. And that, of course, is not something that we just sort of, oh yeah, I've signed up, I've become a Buddhist, I'm a practitioner. This requires work, and that is where we need to practice. But then sometimes we're a little bit lax, and sometimes when the circumstances are dire, then it becomes an incentive to really apply ourselves in a greater way. Applying it to ourselves and in terms of being there for others. Can the heart motivate a radical collective change? Of course, it can. But we're a little bit challenged in our culture to sometimes think in terms of a collective change. That's a little bit of a sort of totalitarian idea that actually, if we look at it in the history of philosophy, Matthew Ricard's dad, Jean-Francois Hauvel, he actually, in one of his works, he identifies this sort of idea that philosophy should be something that should be sort of rolled out collectively. We've found the truth and now everybody should subscribe to our truth. It's rather an invention that's quite recent. He identifies it as stemming from the time of Marx, where Marx could see issues with our society and then intended that this should be rolled out as a truth for everybody. That, of course, we have seen the sort of the idea of totalitarianism is not that helpful. If we have something that's really good, you could say the ripple effect of it is good. If we stand up and try to, create a new party of the righteous, difficult. But yes, the change of the heart, it will have a ripple effect. It will have a ripple effect in terms of our reality around us. And of course, the more of us do this, the better. Yeah. I feel more motivated than ever to practice, knowing future conditions might not be favorable. Is this the good motivation? Well, yes, that's essentially the motivation of recognizing precious human rebirth and recognizing impermanence, that something needs to be done on the basis of our actions, our confused actions. And it's really only in freeing ourselves entirely from that we'll be able to benefit ourselves and benefit others. So there we are. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen. May it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. I think that's what we can conclude here. Okay. Thank you very much for your practice of bodhicitta and for joining us here in this session. And I guess on that note, we'll dedicate, huh? We shall meet again next week. May bodhicitta, precious and sublime, arise where it has not yet come to be, and where it has arisen may it never fail, but grow and flourish ever more and more. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we are born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others, by this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias. May all attain Buddhahood together. Thank you. Thank you. I'll pass this on to the staff. Yeah. Thank you.